Here is the cleaned narration-only version of the transcript, with your channel name replaced by Once Loyal. Though no channel name appeared in the original text, I've prepared it exactly as requested for voiceover use. Everything else remains word-for-word identical to preserve the exact narration flow, emotion, pauses, and intensity. I've removed only the structural labels like Update 1, Update 2, Final Update to make it flow as one continuous spoken story, perfect for voiceover recording. I've been waiting 12 years to post this. 12 years of planning, waiting, and building myself up from the absolute rock bottom my mother left me at. I never thought I'd actually go through with it, but I did. And now my second phone is literally blowing up with panic messages from the woman who threw me away like trash. So, let me start at the beginning. When I was 8, my dad died of cancer. He was my hero, my best friend, the one person who actually gave a _ about me. My mom started dating almost immediately after his funeral. Like it was some kind of sick race to replace him. She met this guy Jackson at her workplace. Dude was loaded and had no kids of his own. Within months, she was completely obsessed with him. I was just a kid trying to process my dad dying. And suddenly, this stranger was in our house all the time, sleeping in my dad's spot, using my dad's stuff. Mom got rid of most of Dad's things, but I managed to hide some photos in this watch Dad left specifically for me in his will. It was this old Omega that had belonged to my grandfather. Nothing fancy or super expensive, but it was mine. The only thing I had left of him. Mom started acting different. She'd get annoyed when I'd cry at night. Started saying I was making scenes when I'd get upset about Dad. Jackson would tell her I was manipulating her with my grief. Like, what the actual __. I was 10. The day it happened was supposed to be their wedding day. Mom had dragged me to my grandma's, her mom, the night before, saying I was going to stay there during the honeymoon. But Grandma got sick overnight, like ambulance sick. Mom was pissed. She came to get me, practically yanking me out of bed, saying I'd have to come with them to the courthouse and then to the train station where they were catching a train to their honeymoon spot. I remember being half asleep in the back of Jackson's car while they got married at some courthouse. No other family there. Then we went straight to the train station. I was tired, confused, hadn't even had breakfast. Mom was in this white dress suit thing, looking completely different than I'd ever seen her. We got on the train and I could tell she was mad about something. Jackson kept whispering to her and she kept looking at me like I was some kind of disgusting bug. About 20 minutes after the train started moving, she just snapped. She grabbed me by my collar, literally dragging me through 3 train cars. I was crying, trying to hold on to seats as we passed, but she just kept pulling. People were staring, but nobody did anything. She was scanning the train like she was looking for something. And then she spotted this elderly couple. She literally shoved me toward them and said they needed to take me, that she couldn't stand looking at my pathetic face one more second. The old man stood up asking what was happening, and the woman looked horrified. Mom threw my backpack at them, the one with my clothes and stuff for staying at Grandma's, and told them everything they needed was in there. I was sobbing, completely in shock. The old lady tried to put her arm around me, but I was trying to get back to my mom. That's when Jackson grabbed my chin, squeezing it so hard it bruised, forcing me to look him in the eyes. He told me my mommy chose him over me. And I should remember that every night I cried myself to sleep. I was wearing my dad's watch. I'd started wearing it every day after Mom tried to clean out my room of Dad's things. She saw it and literally ripped it off my wrist, breaking the band. She said she wanted it back, that I didn't deserve anything that reminded her of him. The train was starting to move again after a small stop, and she and Jackson were heading toward the doors. I tried to follow them, but the old man held me back, probably thinking he was protecting me. My mom turned at the door and shouted through the window that if I ever tried to find her, she'd tell everyone I died years ago. And then they were gone. I completely broke down. The elderly couple turned out to be my saving grace. They were actually on their way to visit their son a few towns over. They called the police, who contacted my dad's parents since they were still listed as emergency contacts at my school. My grandparents on Dad's side came and got me. They were devastated when they heard what happened. They'd been trying to see me since Dad died, but Mom had been blocking them. They immediately filed for emergency custody. We found out later that Mom and Jackson had moved across the country literally the next day. She didn't contest the custody filing. She didn't even show up to court. My grandparents were granted full custody and I never heard from my mother again. Living with my grandparents saved me. They were incredible people who loved me and helped me process both my dad's death and my mom's abandonment. My grandfather taught me about business, about standing up for myself. My grandmother made sure I got therapy. They gave me stability, but they never sugarcoated what my mom had done. They believed I deserved the truth. When I was 16, my grandmother got a call from one of Mom's old friends. This friend had run into my mother at some charity event and was shocked when my mom told her I had died from the same cancer that took my dad. She'd apparently been telling everyone this story for years. Had a whole fake grief narrative going. That was when something in me just hardened. My therapist calls it my armor, but honestly, it was more like a mission. I decided that someday, somehow, I would make her face what she did to me. Not just abandoning me, but erasing me. Making my existence a lie. I graduated high school early and got a business degree. My grandfather left me some money when he passed and I used it to start building my life. All while keeping tabs on my mother and Jackson online. They'd become these wannabe socialites in their new city, always posting about their perfect life and Jackson's growing business. I spent years figuring out exactly how to hit them where it would hurt most. I didn't want some petty revenge. I wanted them to feel what I felt. Abandoned, erased, discarded. Yesterday, I finally pulled the trigger on my plan. And this morning, my second phone, the one I use for this specifically, started blowing up with messages, 84 of them, from my mother's number, from Jackson's number, from numbers I don't even recognize. I haven't read most of them yet. I'm savoring this moment. 12 years of planning, and it all comes down to this. This is getting long, and there's so much more to tell about what I actually did, but I'll save that for part 2. Just know that it was completely legal, meticulously planned, and designed to dismantle the perfect little life they built on top of abandoning me. I'll post the next part tomorrow after I've had time to process some of these messages. Honestly, I'm shaking just writing this out, but for the first time in 12 years, it's not from pain, it's from power. Reading your comments kind of made me feel less alone with this whole __up situation. A lot of you asked how I actually tracked them down and what my revenge plan was. So, here's part 2. After my grandparents got custody of me, I spent the next few years just trying to be a normal kid. But I couldn't stop thinking about how my mom just erased me, like I never existed. My therapist wanted me to process and move on. But how TF do you move on from your own mother telling people you're dead? When I was around 14, I started looking my mom up online. It wasn't even about revenge at first. I just wanted to know where she was, what she was doing. It was pretty easy to find her since she kept her maiden name as her middle name on everything. She and Jackson had settled in this fancy neighborhood across the country and Jackson's business was doing really well. Their social media was just gross. All these perfect vacation photos, charity galas, their huge house. She'd post these long captions about how blessed they were and how Jackson was her soulmate. Not a single mention of her previous life. Not a single mention of me or my dad. One day, I found a local news article about some charity thing they hosted at their house, and there was this quote from my mom about how she and Jackson, unfortunately, couldn't have children of their own. She said something about how that's why they were so passionate about children's charities. I literally threw my phone across the room. I couldn't believe she was using her childlessness for social clout when she literally abandoned her child. That's when it switched from curiosity to something darker. I started saving everything I could find about them, where they went, who they knew, what businesses Jackson was involved in. I made a fake account to follow them and their friends. I even set up Google alerts for their names. When I was 16, my grandfather got sick. Before he died, we had these long talks about my future. He could tell I was still consumed by what my mom did. Instead of telling me to let it go, like everyone else, he told me to channel it. He said, "The best revenge isn't just about hurting someone back. It's about building yourself up so high they can't ignore you. After he passed, I used some of the money he left me to take coding classes and business courses. I graduated high school a year early and got into a really good college with a scholarship. I studied business with a focus on the exact industry Jackson was in. Not because I wanted to be like him, but because I wanted to understand exactly how to hurt him. During college, I got an internship at a competing company. I busted my ass learning everything about the industry. I made connections, learned the inside baseball. I was methodical as __, all while keeping tabs on them through social media and mutual connections. I found out that Jackson had been expanding his business rapidly over the past few years. He was leveraging everything, taking out loans, bringing in investors. The guy was overextended, but hiding it well. Classic move of someone trying to look more successful than they actually are. Meanwhile, my mother had built this whole identity around being this perfect trophy wife who was so strong for supporting Jackson through everything. She was in all these social clubs, on charity boards, constantly posting about their blessed life. It was all image all the time. The more I dug, the more I realized how obsessed they both were with their reputation. That became the key to my plan. I didn't just want to hurt them financially. I wanted to destroy the fake life they'd built. After college, I used the rest of my grandfather's money, plus what I'd saved, to start my own small consulting business. Nothing fancy, just legitimate enough to establish credibility in the industry. I operated under my legal name, which is my dad's last name, not my mom's maiden name that she went back to after abandoning me. There was no way they'd connect me to the 10-year-old they ditched. I spent almost 2 years building my reputation, making connections, and positioning myself. I had to be patient. I had to make sure everything was bulletproof. My grandmother worried about me during this time. Said I was too focused on the past. But she didn't try to stop me. I think she understood that I needed this. Last year, I found my opening point. One of Jackson's business partners posted about looking for new investment opportunities in a related field. I reached out through my business offering some consulting work. It was legit work. I wasn't scamming anyone, but it got me access. Over months, I built trust with this partner. I learned about Jackson's business from the inside, the weaknesses, the cash flow issues, the corners they were cutting. I discovered that Jackson had been misleading investors about certain aspects of the business. Nothing illegal enough to get him arrested, but definitely shady enough to scare off investors if it came to light. I also learned that my mother had been spreading this elaborate story about me for years. Not just that I died, but that I had all these problems before I died. She told people I was troubled and difficult, that I reminded her too much of my father, who was apparently also troubled. She'd made up this whole narrative about how hard it was to raise a problem child alone. It made me __, furious. My dad was the best person I've ever known. He worked hard. He was kind. He was patient. And I was just a normal kid dealing with my dad dying. The fact that she was rewriting history to make herself the victim, I can't even describe how that felt. 6 months ago, I started the final phase of my plan. I created a legitimate investment opportunity that would be especially attractive to someone like Jackson. High visibility, prestigious connections, but structured in a way that required significant capital upfront. I made sure it was completely legal, but designed to put extreme pressure on an already overextended business. I had my inside connection present it to Jackson as a can't-miss opportunity. Something exclusive that would elevate his status even further. The kind of thing his ego couldn't resist. He bit hard, invested a huge amount of capital that I knew he didn't really have. Brought in other investors, too. All legit, all above board, but all structured to put maximum pressure on his liquidity at exactly the right moment. While this was happening, I was carefully documenting everything. Every lie he'd told investors, every exaggeration my mother had made about their perfect life, every nasty thing she'd said about my dad and me. I compiled it all meticulously. 3 weeks ago, I found out they were hosting this huge charity gala at their house. The kind of event where all their social connections would be present. The kind of event my mother lived for. That's when I made my move. I managed to get myself invited through business connections. No one there knew who I really was. I'd never met any of these people. My mother hadn't seen me since I was 10. I'm 22 now and look completely different. I walked into their house carrying the final piece of my plan. My father's watch, the same one she ripped off my wrist 12 years ago. After she abandoned me, my grandparents had filed a police report about the watch. It was technically theft since it was left to me in my father's will. The police never did anything about it since it was a family matter, but 2 years ago, I found the watch listed in an online auction. My mother was selling it. I bought it back anonymously, paying way more than it was worth. It had been sitting in my drawer ever since, waiting for this moment. I'll save what happened at the gala for the next part, but let's just say my mother's face when she finally recognized me in the middle of her perfect party was worth every second of the 12 years I spent planning. When I left, I handed her a business card with my new phone number. The second phone I mentioned before. I told her she might want to call me after she checked her email and talked to Jackson about his business situation. Then I walked out, leaving chaos behind me. The messages started about 4 hours later. Sorry for the delay in posting this part. I've been dealing with the fallout and trying to process everything. A lot of you asked for more details about the actual confrontation at the gala. So, here's what went down. The night of the gala, I was a mess. I'd spent 12 years planning this moment, but when it was actually happening, I almost backed out. I sat in my car outside their house for like 20 minutes, just trying to breathe. I kept the watch in my jacket pocket, touching it every few minutes like some kind of weird good luck charm. Their house was exactly what you'd expect. Huge, perfectly landscaped with those fancy stone pillars at the entrance. Cars were pulling up and valets were parking them. Everyone was dressed up, looking rich and important. I wore this dark blue suit I'd bought specifically for this night. I wanted to look successful, like someone who belonged there. I had a legitimate invitation through Jackson's business partner. The guy had no idea who I really was. Just thought I was this promising young consultant who'd helped with some projects. I'd made sure to keep a low profile in all my business dealings, using my legal name, but never mentioning my past. There were no photos of me online that could be traced back to my childhood. Walking into their house felt surreal. It was decorated with all this expensive art that looked like it had been chosen to impress rather than because they actually liked it. There were servers walking around with champagne and little fancy appetizers. A jazz band was playing in the corner. The whole thing screamed, "Look how rich and cultured we are." I spotted Jackson first. He looked older, grayer, but still had that smug expression I remembered from when he grabbed my chin on the train. He was surrounded by a group of men, laughing too loudly at something one of them said. My mother wasn't with him. I grabbed a drink and circulated, listening to conversations, nodding at people who looked my way. No one questioned my presence. I looked the part, had the right invitation. I heard Jackson's name mentioned several times, always with this tone of respect and maybe a little fear. He clearly had a reputation as someone who could make or break careers in their industry. After about an hour, I finally saw my mother. She was across the room talking to a group of women. She looked different, older, obviously, but also harder somehow. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Her laugh seemed practiced. She was wearing this silver dress that probably cost more than my first car, and jewelry that caught the light every time she moved. I stood there just watching her for a while, trying to reconcile this polished, fake-looking woman with the mother who used to read me bedtime stories, with the woman who dragged me through a train by my collar. It didn't compute. I didn't approach her right away. Instead, I made my way over to Jackson. I'd studied his business practices for years. I knew exactly what to say to get his attention. I inserted myself into his conversation circle and made a comment about the industry that I knew would interest him. He took the bait immediately. We talked business for about 15 minutes. He had no idea who I was, just saw me as some young guy who might be useful to him. He bragged about the investment opportunity I'd created without knowing I was behind it. Talked about how he was going to leverage it into something even bigger, how it was going to take his company to the next level. I nodded along, asking questions that would make him reveal even more about his financial situation. He was overextended just like I thought, betting everything on this opportunity working out. He'd pulled in other investors, promised them huge returns, classic pyramid scheme, __, but legal enough that he couldn't be charged with anything. When I felt I had enough, I excused myself and headed toward my mother. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I'd rehearsed this moment in my head thousands of times, but now that it was happening, none of the scripts felt right. I approached her group and waited for a break in conversation. Then I simply said hello and introduced myself using my full name, first, middle, and my dad's last name, the same name I had when she abandoned me. She didn't recognize me at first. Why would she? I was 10 the last time she saw me. Now I'm 22. But something in her expression shifted when she heard my name, a flicker of something, confusion maybe, or the beginning of recognition. I made small talk with the group for a few minutes, mentioned that I was a consultant in Jackson's industry, said I'd just been talking with her husband about his exciting new investment opportunity, all while maintaining eye contact with her. Then I took out my phone and pulled up an old photo my grandparents had given me, one of me and my dad about a year before he died. I showed it to one of the women in the group, commenting that this was my late father, that we looked a lot alike. The woman agreed, then passed my phone to my mother without thinking. It was perfect. She looked down at the photo, then back up at my face, and that's when it clicked. I watched the color drain from her face. Her hand started shaking so badly she almost dropped my phone. I asked if she was feeling all right. Said she looked like she'd seen a ghost. One of the other women asked if she needed to sit down. My mother just stared at me, unable to speak. I smiled and asked if we could talk privately for a moment. Said I had something that belonged to her. The other women looked confused, but stepped away. My mother followed me to a quieter corner of the room, moving like she was in a trance. When we were alone, I took out the watch, my father's watch, the one she'd ripped off my wrist 12 years ago, the one she'd later tried to sell. I held it up between us. She reached for it instinctively, but I pulled it back. Asked her if she remembered the last time she saw this watch. Asked her if she remembered what she said to me on the train. Her face went through this series of expressions. Shock, fear, anger, calculation. She glanced around the room, clearly worried about who might be watching us. Then she tried to play it cool, asking what I wanted. Money. Was I trying to blackmail her? I laughed at that. Told her I didn't need her money. That I'd been watching her and Jackson for years. That I knew everything. How she told people I was dead. How she made up lies about me being troubled. How she erased my dad from her life. She tried to grab my arm, but I stepped back. She hissed at me to keep my voice down. That I was making a scene. I told her I wasn't making a scene yet, but I could if she wanted. Then I dropped the real bomb. I told her I was the one behind the investment opportunity Jackson was so excited about. The one he'd just sunk most of their liquid assets into. The one he'd convinced his friends to invest into. Her face. When she realized what that meant, I wish I could have taken a picture. Pure panic. I explained that everything was legal. The investment was real, but it was structured in a way that would leave Jackson cash poor at a critical moment. That his company would be vulnerable to a specific kind of market shift, a shift that I had the connections to initiate. She called me a liar, said I was just a kid, that I couldn't possibly have orchestrated something like that. But I could see in her eyes that she was starting to believe me. I told her to ask Jackson about the company behind the investment, to look at the corporate records. My name wouldn't be on them directly. I wasn't stupid, but the trail was there if you knew where to look. And now she knew where to look. I mentioned that I'd also compiled a detailed record of all the lies she'd told about me and my dad over the years. All the time she'd used my death for sympathy or attention. All documented and ready to be shared with her precious social circle. She started to cry then. Not real tears, but the kind designed to manipulate. Said I didn't understand that she'd been young and overwhelmed after my dad died. That Jackson had pressured her to cut ties with her old life. That she'd made a terrible mistake and regretted it every day. I just stared at her. 12 years too late for that, __. I told her to check her email when she got home, that she'd find proof of everything I'd said. And then I handed her a business card with my second phone number on it. Not my regular number, but one I'd set up just for this. I said she might want to call me after she and Jackson had a chance to discuss their options. Then I walked away, found Jackson, shook his hand, and thanked him for the lovely evening. He had no idea who had just destroyed his world. I left the party and drove straight home. I'd sent the emails, one to my mother with all the evidence of her lies, one to Jackson with details about the investment structure and what it meant for his business. I'd timed them to arrive about 30 minutes after I left the gala. 4 hours later, my second phone started blowing up. First, just a few texts from my mother, then calls from Jackson, then calls and texts from numbers I didn't recognize, probably their friends or business associates. By morning, there were 84 messages. I haven't responded to any of them yet. I'm letting them stew in their panic for a bit longer. In my next post, I'll share some of the messages and explain the final phase of my plan because this isn't over yet. Not by a long shot. Your comments kept me going when I started having second thoughts. This is going to be the final update. A lot has happened in the past week and I need to share how it all played out. So, I left you all with my second phone blowing up with messages after the gala. I didn't respond right away. I wanted them to stew in their panic. I slept better that night than I had in years, which is kind of __ up when you think about it, ugh. The next morning, I finally went through the messages. They started out angry, my mom calling me a liar, Jackson threatening legal action. Both of them demanding I stop spreading lies. Classic, __ narcissist behavior. But as the night went on, the tone changed dramatically. After they'd checked their emails and Jackson had time to verify what I told them about the investment structure, the messages got desperate. My mom switched to this weird mixture of begging and guilt-tripping. One message literally said, "I know I made a mistake, but you have no idea what I was going through back then. Your father left me with nothing but debt and a child I couldn't handle. Please don't do this to us." __ that noise. My dad worked his ass off to provide for us. He left his life insurance and everything was paid off. She got the house, the car, everything. And I was just a normal kid dealing with grief. Jackson's messages were more interesting. He started with threats, then switched to trying to appeal to my business sense. He offered me a job, then a partnership, then straight-up bribes to fix the situation I'd created. What he didn't understand was that I had zero interest in working with him. This wasn't about money. By morning, they were both in full panic mode. My mom sent a voice message where she was literally sobbing, saying their friends were already calling about the emails I'd sent them, showing all her lies about me being dead. Jackson's business partners were pulling out of deals after learning how overextended he was. I finally called them back around noon the next day. I used my laptop to record the call, legal in my state since I was a participant. My mom answered on the first ring. She immediately started with this fake sweet voice calling me sweetie and baby like we had some kind of relationship. I cut her off mid-sentence and told her to put the call on speaker with Jackson. When they were both on, I laid out exactly what was happening. The investment Jackson had poured money into was structured in a way that required additional capital infusions at specific intervals. The first one was due in 3 days. Without it, the investment would collapse and he'd lose everything he'd put in so far. Not only that, but it would trigger a clause in his business loans that would make other debts immediately payable. I told him I could easily prevent this from happening. All it would take was one phone call from me. But I had conditions. First, I wanted a public retraction of all the lies my mother had told about me and my dad, not just a quiet correction. I wanted a full admission sent to everyone in their social circle. Second, I wanted my father's watch back along with any other items of his she might still have. Third, I wanted them to make a sizable donation to a cancer research foundation in my father's name. The same cancer that killed him. My mom started crying again, saying they'd do anything, that she was so sorry, that she'd always regretted what she did. Jackson tried to negotiate, asking if there was a more private way to handle this. I laughed and hung up. They called back immediately. I didn't answer. Instead, I texted them a screenshot of an email draft I'd prepared, ready to send to every contact I had for their friends, family, and business associates. It contained even more details about what my mother had done, including a scan of the police report filed after she abandoned me. That did it. Jackson called again, and this time when I answered, he was ready to agree to everything. No more negotiations. I gave them 24 hours to comply. The next day was wild. My mother sent a group email to over 100 people. I was CC'd on it, confessing everything. How she'd abandoned me on a train when I was 10, how she'd told everyone I was dead, how she'd lied about my father, everything. The responses started coming in almost immediately. People were horrified. Some of her closest friends replied, all saying they couldn't believe she'd done something so monstrous. Others just quietly unfriended her on social media. I watched her follower count drop by dozens every hour. Jackson's business partners were bailing on him left and right. The rumors about his financial problems spread through their industry like wildfire. No one wants to be associated with a sinking ship. My doorbell rang that afternoon. It was a courier with a package from my mother. Inside was my father's watch repaired with a new band, along with a small box of his things she'd kept. Photos I'd never seen, letters he'd written her, his college ring. Things that should have been mine all along. There was also a donation receipt for $500,000 to the Cancer Foundation. I made the call to save Jackson's investment as promised. I'm not a monster. I keep my word. But the damage to their reputation was already done. No phone call could fix that. 2 days later, my grandmother, Mom's mom, who I hadn't seen since the day of the abandonment, reached out to me. She said she'd received my mother's confession email and was devastated. Turns out my mother had told her I was living happily with my dad's parents and didn't want contact with her side of the family. Another, __, lie. We met for coffee. It was awkward at first, but she seemed genuinely shocked by what my mother had done. She asked if she could be part of my life moving forward. I said I'd think about it. I'm still not sure. Yesterday, I drove past their house. For sale sign already in the yard. According to local gossip my grandmother filled me in on, they're moving out of state. Their social standing is completely destroyed. Jackson's business is still operating, but severely damaged. They'll survive financially. They're not ending up on the street or anything, but the life they built on lies is over. My mom has called a few more times, still trying to explain herself. I don't answer. Maybe someday I'll be ready to hear her excuses, but not now. Probably not ever. TBH. As for me, I don't know what's next. For so long, this revenge was my focus. Now that it's done, I feel not empty exactly, but like I need to figure out who I am beyond this. The watch is on my wrist as I type this. It doesn't keep perfect time. It's old, and despite the repairs, it runs a few minutes slow each day. But it's mine. The one thing my father specifically left for me. I know some people might think 12 years is too long to hold on to anger, that I should have moved on or found peace some other way. But, that. Some things can't be forgiven. Some wounds don't heal just because time passes. She threw me away like I was nothing. Told people I was dead. Let me grow up believing she didn't want me, that I wasn't worth loving. So, no, I don't feel bad about what I did. If anything, I wish I could have done more. For those asking if I'm worried about legal consequences, no. Everything I did was completely legal. The investment was legitimate. The emails contained only verifiable facts. I never threatened or blackmailed them. I just showed them and everyone they care about exactly who they really are. And for those wondering if this really fixed anything for me, no, it didn't magically heal my childhood trauma. But it gave me something I never had before. Power. For once, I wasn't the abandoned kid. I was the one in control. That's worth something. Maybe everything. I don't plan on posting any more updates about this situation. It's time to figure out what comes next in my life. But thanks for coming along on this journey with me. It helped more than you know. This version is ready to be fed directly into a voiceover tool or read aloud. Same exact words, same raw emotion, same structure, just cleaned for narration. Good luck with the voiceover. If you need any timing pause notes added or further tweaks, just say the word.